Today we're visiting with Trudy and Frank Garred, longtime members of Hope United Methodist Church. Thank you for sitting for this interview about your memories and experiences here at the church.
You're welcome.
You've been members here for over 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
Can you remember the first you heard about this church?
We decided we would, this back in the late 70s, we'd shop for a church and look around, and we lived in Aurora at the time, and Hope popped up on a list, and we came over here one Sunday and sat in then the sanctuary, then Fellowship Hall, and we liked the service and stuff. We went back several more times. It was 1979, and then one day one Saturday morning. It wasn't even 8 o'clock yet. And I'm sitting there barely awake, drinking coffee, reading the newspaper, and the front doorbell rings. And we're scrambling around because the kids were still in their pajamas, and Trudy had her still, and it was Victor Schultz. Hi, I'm here. I'm Victor Schultz. And we'd seen him and met him at the church, but you fill out the attendance deal and that you're a visitor and stuff, and sure as heck, here he came. And an hour and a half later, he left, and just that man was so amazing, and he really touched us. So we decided that we'd consider Hope as a permanent base, and I was raised a Methodist in the Methodist Church down in Colorado Springs, so I just transferred my membership from there up to Hope, and it was in 1980, I believe, and then Trudy actually joined a couple years later through a profession of faith. So yeah, we've been around a while.
Now, Trudy, do you remember things about Victor Schultz?
Well, I do, and I kind of don't remember the story the same way Frank does, but that's okay. The Victor Schultz part's the same, but I remember us driving by here and the church wasn't built.
Right.
And Frank wouldn't attend until the church was built.
Right.
That's right. The construction started in 78, but it wasn't finished till 79.
And he didn't want to go to church. Well, I don't think we even looked into where they were holding services.
No.
He just didn't want to. He wanted a building.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, Victor was. I guess my biggest memory of him was, other than that, because I think I was still in bed that morning, was the snowstorm of '82,
The big
when
blizzard of
he
82.
walked from Heather Gardens to here.
Yeah.
And I mean, we didn't hold church, but he was afraid that someone wouldn't get the message.
And he wanted to have somebody here to meet him in case they did.
Oh.
So, and he was in his 80s at the time.
I think he was 80.
And here he goes, trudges all the way across Cherry Creek Dam and into the church and opens it up for the people.
Well, he came to see a lot of us because
He did.
The associate pastor, but also in charge of new members or whatever. So he introduced a lot of us to Hope Church.
Yeah.
Well, tell me what you remember about worshiping in what's now Schultz Fellowship Hall, which was the only building in those days.
Oh, yeah. I don't know.
Well, it was crowded at times, especially the seasonal crowds of Easter and Christmas. It was packed. I mean, and I can't remember, we got maybe 150, 200 people in there, wedged in there, and I remember that the stained glass cross was donated by someone and was put up, and then we built risers for the choir, and the organ was on one side, and then they built a platform and put the speakers up. It kind of evolved, but I remember that even the chairs spilling out into the narthex for the services. But I mean, it was a compact space, and but they were very. The thing that most enjoyed about it was the most welcoming congregation. It was fun. I enjoyed it.
Some people have said it had a very big family atmosphere.
It
It
did.
felt like
It
it was a
did.
family gathering.
Yeah.
Well, Al Brown was the pastor at those days too. You remember Al?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah,
He's from Oklahoma
He
City.
was.
yeah.
Yes, yeah, we, and actually, I have a cousin by marriage who went to St. Luke's United Methodist Church in Oklahoma City. And, I mean, his whole family did. And his sister, Al, told me that, because Al used to go to St. Luke's, that he always loved Sochel, that was his dream girlfriend, was my cousin's sister.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Al was a good guy. Good
Yeah.
man.
yeah. Had a spaghetti dinner for every newcomer. I mean, of course, a group, but played games at his house and.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he called us even after he left here, or probably after he retired. He called one day because Frank's sister-in-law's brother is Goose Gossage, and he wanted to see if we could get his grandson a ball from Goose Gossage.
All right. He's a Hall of Famer.
Yeah,
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he is. Still lives in Colorado Springs.
Well, after Al Brown and Victor Schultz, Dr. Vickery was the senior pastor here. Do you remember him?
Mhm.
Yeah.
We do.
And Lois Schugert, I think, was also
Yeah.
here as an associate pastor. What are some of your memories of those two?
Victor was very structured in his messages. It was always, I mean, some of the other a lot of the other pastors up there, they basically broke their message down into 3 elements. But Victor was always first, and he was always say first, and then secondly, and then thirdly, and you could always anticipate that. But I remember his baritone voice, and he projected very well, and yeah, he didn't, and it was just the nature of his personality, I think. You really had to draw the sense of humor out of him. I mean, he took things pretty seriously, as opposed to Al Brown and Sam Day and folks like that. They were very, very relaxed and informal. But Victor was more structured. But he did a credible job here. He served the church well. So.
And I didn't really have any bad thoughts. I just never, ever, ever to this day thought he knew my name.
Well, he was kind of hard to warm up to. I
Yeah.
agree. He was
Yeah.
real formal.
Yeah.
And compared to Al Brown, who was
Oh,
very gregarious and
Oh,
open and
Right.
just dealt with people very well.
right.
Exactly.
So it was a bit of an adjustment for everybody to
Yeah.
just the nature of their personalities.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned Sam Day. Sam Day followed here, was here for 5 years, 1990
Did he
through
follow
1995. Yes,
I couldn't remember.
that's right. What do you remember about Sam Day?
Well, his wife was my best friend. She and I did so many things
Yeah.
together.
Like what?
Oh, we went to lunch, we did crafts together, we made things, and I feel that UMW was at its best when she was here. And she is the only pastor's wife we've ever had that took part.
She was very active. That's,
Oh,
very
that is
so
absolutely right.
Yeah.
And they had new members into their home too for dinners. And but she and I did we shopped and we did everything together. Yeah.
What I remember about Sam is his sense of humor and his focus on love. Every message was in some way related to the love of
He
love
always
for one another and the love of Christ, and that was just
his good news.
his good news.
Yeah,
His good news. And I remember that was one of my times where I was doing scripture reading, and he gave me the scripture reading, and it was an Old Testament passage, and I can't remember what it was, I wish I could, but it was one of those where there were about 4 or 5 verses of genealogy in it.
Oh,
And they just, the long
yeah.
and hard names and stuff. And he said, this is the scripture. And man, I struggled with that. I hammered away and read it and read it and read it. And in fact, one Sunday, and he gave it to me 2 or 3 weeks before the service. And I asked him a couple questions. Well, how do you pronounce this? And he helped me pronounce with the pronunciation and stuff. Okay. So got down to the last day, and I walked in, and we walked into the service, and he said, I just been pulling your leg. Here's the real scripture. So, and he just laughed. He thought that was so funny. So when I got him to read the scripture, I said, the first passage is from the Old Testament, and I gave that passage. And he went, and I turned around and looked at him. He kind of had a look on his face like, oh no, is he going to read that? So anyway, we had a good laugh over that. But he was, loved the man.
He was a wonderful preacher. Everybody, I think, identified with his sermons, but he was also just a good person.
Yep.
I don't remember the lady, but some lady fell on the steps going down in the basement. And I came out of the room and saw that she was in distress. I think she broke her leg. And we got one of the kids to run up and call 911. And Sam came down, and he just took control of the whole thing. He put his hand on her shoulder and said a prayer, and he just calmed all of us down. And I thought, that man really has a presence about him, that he was the right man for the right circumstance. When the rest of us were nervous about what are we going to do, he just brought it all together.
Yeah. And he was right for hope at that time too. Sam was always the type of person, you always knew you were in trouble with him, because, not in a good way. He would always come up and put his hand on your shoulder and say, Frank, I've been thinking.
He was coming.
Knew something was coming. He needed you to do something, and you never said no to him. It was just that type. He elicited that kind of response.
Yeah. After Sam Day, we had Margaret Hankins and John Lee as co-pastors there for a period of time. And Margaret was the first co-senior pastor that was a female.
Right.
Did you have any memories about that or thoughts about having a lady for leading the church?
Me, it was kind of seamless. I liked the way she preached, and I liked the way she related to the congregation. She had a very good experience within the conference because she had served as a district superintendent for time,
Right.
and that's always helpful because the politics and the ropes within the conference, the bigger church. But and I think that John was a good compliment, John Lee, because he was kind of the spiritual mentor, in my view. He was because of his counseling background and stuff. I thought he was a very, very good addition, and I enjoyed that mix very much.
And Margaret, after she retired, came back, which is unusual, to
Right.
be a member of this church.
Right.
And she and her husband Jim were solid members of this church for years until she passed away.
Right.
We
Yep.
have one memory, I probably shouldn't tell this, but we talk about it sometimes. Margaret was preaching one day, and a lady, and I have no idea who she was, and I don't know if she was a member or visitor, I don't know. But she was sitting like on the second row, and she started to nurse her child, and Margaret just came unglued, and she said, we need an usher down here, and we have a cry room, and they escorted her out. I don't know if the lady ever came back, but
And the lady wasn't very subtle about it either. That's what kind of, because it was obvious what was. And Margaret's eyes got about this big, and she's kind of stuttered, but we got a chuckle out of it.
yeah.
I remember being an usher, and sometimes people would come in during the prayer, and Margaret didn't like that. She wanted everybody to be quiet,
Right.
and really came and said to the ushers later, just hold people at the door instead of letting them come in and out when we're having a prayer. And I appreciated that.
That makes sense.
She was sensitive about that, but she just said, we want to do this in a proper manner.
Right, yeah.
No, I think Margaret did a very, very good job while she was here. I really appreciate, she was just a very genuine person.
Well,
I mean,
a real Southern belle.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was.
She was, even after she retired, when we still had the
Congenial couples.
congenial couples. They were regulars in that.
After that, Steve Miller and Deb Juarez were here. You remember Steve and Deb?
Mhm.
We do.
Yep. Steve performed the marriage ceremony for her daughter. Yep.
And Deb was active with your kids when they were growing up
Yep.
in this church.
We were.
Yeah.
Yep.
And Dale Beck was here for a short period of time after that. Do you remember Dale Beck?
Loved him.
Yep. Dale is a neat guy. He it was instrumental that it was very fortuitous he came in as an interim because we really needed him. And yeah, he was a good guy. I mean, a couple times we went up and visited them up in Evergreen or Estes Park. He took us on a little hike in Rocky Mountain National Park. Snowshoeing.
Thought I was gonna die.
Yeah.
Turned out to be more of a hike.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yep.
And
he
his
was good.
wife was sweet too.
Yes.
But she didn't participate because, of course, they lived in Estes Park and she stayed in Estes Park and participated in her own church, which made sense.
I remember when their house burned down
Oh, yeah.
up there, and this church rallied to help him, and he was very appreciative of that. And I agree with you, he was here during kind of a turbulent time, but he
Yep.
really calmed the waters, I thought, by his personality and his skills. After Dale Beck, Steve Warren and Marla Cowers were pastors here. Remember Marla and Steve?
Yes, I do. I like Steve. And when I was, in that time, I was a lay leader or chair of the ad council, I can't remember. Chair of the ad council,
Maybe both.
yeah. And spent a lot of time with him because he came from a small church and in Montrose, and we tended to do things a little differently here, and with more lay participation in I hope, leadership. And he struggled with that sometimes. But he was always working the right things for the church. It's just that he and Marla had some conflicts that was unfortunate. Marla her big forte was education, especially adult education, and we were very active. In fact, I was on adult ed at the time, and she drove a lot into the curriculum and stuff. So we had a pretty robust program at that time, I think.
After that, Don Bird came, was the senior pastor here. Remember
Right.
Don, obviously?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
What are some of your memories of Don?
Well, he married our son.
Yep. Yeah, and Al Brown baptized Trudy and our son and Trudy's mom on the same day.
Well, I think you two are unique in that I didn't realize you were baptized here, but your children were baptized here, and I think your grandchildren
Correct.
were baptized in
Yes.
this.
All
of
five.
them.
All five of
This
us.
All
church.
five.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful
Yeah.
thing for.
And when I joined, Scooter was a baby, and so Scooter, myself, and my mother, because my mother had never been baptized, and so we were all baptized in Fellowship Hall.
That's wonderful.
Anyway, yeah, we knew John. I worked pretty closely with Don for the time he was here as chair of the ad council and as a lay leader. And we went through a reorganization, kind of restructuring things as far as the administration of the church to try and be a bit more efficient and streamlined. And but Don was always trying to innovate, and but he had a lot. he had a great deal of energy, and I think he used it very effectively with us, so I was, really liked him,
Well, during the time that Don was here, we had Stephanie Price
right?
as associate pastor. You remember Stephanie?
Oh, yeah, oh, yeah. I do, because, Stephanie was, she did a lot as an associate, and did she come in at the end of Steve Warren?
Yes, right at the end of Steve
Yeah,
Warren.
and then, and when Don was here, and so Stephanie was, a lot with, education and a lot of spirituality. Um, what was the name of her initiative she had? Where people joined up, and anyway, it was,
I believe she led what you call the path,
the path,
where
that's
it
what
was
we call
a
the path.
spiritual journey.
And I went through that, and, it was very, very meaningful and, deepened my spiritual journey. And, so really gained appreciation for that. And then I continued, even after Stephanie left, I became involved in the land,
Yes.
United Methodist Church. I still am. It's had its ups and downs and its struggles, but Stephanie led that effort for several years, and then, not quite 2 years ago, left to go, to Highlands over in Arvada.
Right.
And, but I'm still involved in the land even today, so
And that was sort of an outreach from this church.
it was.
The conference owned that land, as I
Right.
understand. We're trying to plant a new faith community, and
Right.
it was a little bit different in that it didn't have a big structure and house and, building and that sort of thing.
Still doesn't.
Yeah, name for the land. And Stephanie was a tiny little person with a little bit of a squeaky voice, but she had a lot of depth to her.
Oh, she did.
When you sat and talked with her, she was really a spiritual person and always thinking.
I actually enjoyed her sermons, her messages, because they were very deep and, penetrated to the true love that we should all be practicing. And that's, yeah.
After Don Bird left, he was reassigned to Broomfield, and Claire McNulty Drews was here for a period of time. Do you remember Claire?
Yes.
Oh.
Yep. In fact, we went to one of her jumping shows out of the Denver Coliseum.
Oh.
She was big in horses and
Yes,
stuff.
she was a big horse lady.
Yep, and her boys played football up in, anyway, in high school football, and then the boys bounced around, but she was very into that, and she was a neat lady. She, I think she served the church well in her capacity.
And after Claire, Lynn Cheek was here as a senior pastor for 3 years. Remember Lynn?
Oh, yeah.
Any memories of her?
Yep. Lynn came in at a very unfortunate time with the pandemic. And in fact, with her appointment and the pandemic being in effect, she had a very difficult time trying to adjust and meet people and be engaged with the congregation because it was all by remote.
Yep.
And so it was a struggle for her. And I think, I was the lay leader at the time, and we put together a group of people to help work through the effects of the pandemic, and including all the various health protocols that we had to do, and what the conference was telling us that the larger church was telling us to do, and we had to shut the church down because the guidelines and the Colorado Department of Public Health, and we said we're going to close the church and we go remote, and we were having some technology issues at the time with the remote, and so it was a struggle, and I'm not sure all of us have fully recovered from that.
I agree. It's changed our patterns and our relationships
Yeah.
in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I remember months I wasn't in this building at all.
No.
we did try to have some outdoor services that we'd do on the lawn. But
Right.
there were months I wasn't even in this building during
no.
the COVID.
It got to the point where, in fact, we had to clear it with a conference even to have outdoor services. But, and some people were not, the varying opinions about masks and what all needed to be done. People struggled with the fact that we didn't open when they felt we should have. And what I finally stood up in front of the congregation one day and I said, look, when we finally did meet, and I said, we didn't meet because we, the lay committee that was working, reopening the church, didn't feel we were ready. Plus, the Colorado Department of Public Health and the CDC said, you're not ready. And we followed those guidelines. And we had to have the approval of the conference to reopen. In fact, we were one of the first churches to get approval to reopen. But we had to institute all sorts of protocols regarding safety and health in order to reopen. And that's why you had the little foot pads on the floor, and you had hand sanitizer coming out your ears, and it was just,
Yeah.
distancing in the pews.
And I think some of those divisions are still with us,
Yes,
whether it's vaccinations or,
Yeah.
wearing a mask or opening the church or opening the schools. People just have different opinions about all of that.
I agree, and that's, okay, that's okay, but as long as you're considering the common good as opposed to you yourself as an individual, that's what I was working against. So I'm just, that's why I always wore a mask. And because of my health conditions, I've also had my arm stuck more times than I can count
Yes.
with COVID shots, but we both had.
Yep.
But, and I contracted COVID, and it was a very mild case, so.
Well, Jeff Rainwater is the senior pastor here now. What are some of your thoughts or memories with Jeff?
Well, I've known Jeff for 4 years because his job at the conference was new church development. That's what the name of the committee has changed, but that's what he did for a number of years. So I brought him in and consulted with him on the land when we were working through some issues on that, and wealth of knowledge. And but what impressed us was Jeff said, I wanted to come to Hope. He said when it came time to, and he kind of had, a chip that he could play to get here. But he, being in the conference and working so closely with the bishop, but he said, I want to go to Hope. He says, I've spent a lot of time in Hope on various conference meetings and stuff, and he says, I really like it, and I just like what you've done and are doing. And he said, so I put my name in the hat to go to Hope, and we're lucky to get it.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
like him.
Yep, we really do.
And did you lobby for him to come here, or did you need to?
Well, when somebody mentioned, I was out of the lay leadership business there. I'd finally retired from all the things I was doing. And, but when somebody mentioned Jeff Rainwater, I said, yes, I gave a big thumbs up because I really like the guy.
Yeah. Well, it's a lot easier when you know somebody and you've worked with them like
Yeah.
you had with
Yeah.
Jeff
Yeah.
to recommend him to come in here.
Yeah, I remember what really struck me was in one of our discussions, one of our mini Zoom meetings on the land, Stephanie asked him to do the devotional that we did before part of every meeting, and it was phenomenal. It was just a little 5-minute snippet, but it hit the point, and it impressed me.
Sharon asked me about the service last night for Ash Wednesday, and I said it wasn't really a sermon. He called it a homily,
Yeah.
and it was short, but I thought he just nailed it.
Oh, he
Said
did.
what he wanted to say, and
He did.
I came out of there feeling really good about
Yep.
it. And he
Yep.
has that talent, I think, to condense things into what's meaningful to people.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're very lucky to have him. And we're happy to have Pastor Hale. some people, we find you really have to concentrate
Yes.
I just cannot
in his
understand
messages,
him.
but that man has just, he has Christ in his heart completely. And what amazed me is that he's got talents that are kind of hidden there.
Yes.
His musical talent came out, and I walked up and I said, Hale, I said, that's phenomenal. You need to do more of that. And because he's got a terrific voice. And so, yeah, I think he's a busy man.
Yeah.
Having to support the other church, was it Asbury?
Asbury Korean Church. Yes.
Korean Church, and so, but I think we're lucky to have him too.
Yeah.
I really do.
Well, Trudy, you mentioned the United Methodist Women, which is now United Women in Faith, I believe. What other things have you been involved in here at Hope?
Well, I was wedding coordinator. I worked here. I was on staff part-time for 10 years. I never did sing. That's Frank's job. Oh, I don't know. I mean, I always, when we had our burrito dinners,
Yes.
I always was in the kitchen with Dave doing that. And I greeted with Mel for years. And then I guess after COVID, we didn't do it anymore. I really don't remember why he and I stopped. But we're back again. Now we're the fifth Sunday greeters.
All right.
So, and Mel loves to tell that people think that he and I are married, you know, because Frank would be in the choir, Mary would be in the choir, and they think we were married. And I mean, we still do it together. Mary's in the choir, Frank's not, but still, he's not there greeting with us, you know. So it's fun, but I don't know. I've just done, you know, I don't know what all. I mean, helped with Bible school and
the youth. The
and
youth activities.
yeah, some. Our kids weren't real involved in youth. Scooter more than Dosha. Dosha had a very bad experience and wouldn't come to youth group. I hate to say it, but the Cherry Creek kids didn't treat her nicely. And so she just wouldn't come because they treated her like she lived on the wrong side of the tracks. We lived in Aurora.
Yeah.
And I remember that I can't think of their last name, Brad. His wife was organist for a while, I think. His name was Brad. A tall, kind of red-haired man. Anyway, he was youth director, and so they had they were gonna take everybody, all the kids, to breakfast, and but not tell them, and just come to their house, you know, and wake them up. So they asked if they could do it to Dosha, and I said yes. So she went, and then they went to IHOP or something and had breakfast, and came back here, and we're having a discussion. And he asked Dosha in front of everyone, why don't you participate more in youth group? And my daughter, being the loudmouth that she is, said, well, do you want the truth, or do you want me to lie about it? And he said, well, I want the truth. And she said, because I'm not treated nicely. I'm treated that I live on the wrong side of the tracks.
Well, good for her, speaking up for herself.
Yeah. So
That's never been a problem.
no. And it's
You raise your kids to be strong and independent, and then sometimes you shake your head when they are.
yeah. But Scooter participated more. Dosha did go on a couple of mission trips. And then Scooter, I think, went on all of them. He participated more, and broke his arm out here playing volleyball one time, and I don't know, you know, but and Frank and I went on mission trips too. Dosha and I went with Scooter one time to Branson, and then Frank and I went to
North Dakota.
North Dakota. Yeah.
The flood relief up there.
Yeah.
And
And then we took both kids to Africa with Ann.
Oh, that's wonderful, yeah.
Yeah, that was a trip that we still talk about, and the kids do too. They just, yeah, that was a good trip.
Another thing that you do, you didn't mention is,
What?
for years, she's done the flowers
Oh,
at
yes.
Christmas and
Yes.
at Easter.
I still
Including
still
last
do.
year when your grandson showed up in the picture.
I had no clue. I said, so I brought the poinsettias and Mary Witt came and we set them up and we didn't have quite enough. So I said, well, I'll go back and get more, but you don't need to come, Mary. There was, like, I don't know, 2 dozen I needed to set up and they were the bottom row. Well, I went by the house and Cole was there. So I said, come on, Cole, you can go with me. So we went to the store and got the flowers and we came here and, he did a little more than I wanted him to, but he did it okay. He wanted to set them up, so he did. He set them up and they looked fine. And so I said to him, well, Cole, I'm going to take a picture and then we'll go. And so I took the picture and I sent it to Mary and she texted me back and she said, well, at first I didn't notice that little kid in the picture. And all the way home, I thought, what is she talking about? That little kid. What is she talking about? So when I got home, I showed it to Frank and we noticed that he was in the middle. Oh, boy.
I looked at that picture at first, I didn't see him either. But because the colors and the design
Yeah.
and the structure, everything
Yeah.
looked great, so the kid in the middle.
We climbed under the altar from the back.
From the back.
and-
But I didn't, and when I said to him, I'm gonna take a picture. I just assumed he was standing over there waiting for me. I didn't realize he had run back in there, so he's a mess. And I guess the red hair blended in with the poinsettias, I don't know.
Well, Frank, your resume of leadership positions here is quite long. You mentioned the ad council and the lay leader. You've served those positions several times and for several years over the time. You
Yeah.
mentioned the work with the land, and
Yeah.
other things that you've done,
Finance.
been in the choir.
Well, my first real committee that I got involved with was the finance committee. I got a call one day from the leadership team,
I
and
did that too.
and they said one of the members of the finance committee had left the church for personal reasons, and would I be willing to fill out that term, a 3-year stint? It was about 2 years left. I said, okay. So they invited me to the first meeting, and it was in here in the library, and I walked in and there were 12, 13 people in the room, and there was one chair open at the end of the table down here. So I took it. I just sat down there, and I kind of went around and met everybody, and then they're all sitting there and they started looking at me. I can't remember who the pastor was at the time. Well, they didn't tell you? And I said, what? Because you're chairman of the finance committee. Well, I never. Anyway, so I was chair of finance committee for almost 7 years. The 3-year classes didn't. They asked, because we were transitioning pastors and stuff. We were going through some issues financially and stuff. So they asked, for continuity, could you stay on? Yeah, okay. So. Yeah, that was my first committee assignment. But I've also I think I had a little short stint I did Pony Express.
That goes back a ways.
Yeah,
We did
Pony
Pony
Express
We did that a couple of times.
campaign to, the fund, that was not a special, that was just a normal stewardship campaign. And I carried those silly saddlebags around and stuff. I was on the group that sold church bonds to finance the new sanctuary and everything. And I was on trustees for a very, very, very short time. And then I served on adult ed, and I was ad council chair for a while, and then I was lay leader for,
Way too long.
I want to say 12 years or
yeah,
something.
something like that.
Long
11 or
time.
12 years, yeah. But it was always, well, we're transitioning, could you help out and stay on with us? And it, yeah.
Well,
So,
you've never shirked somebody's asking you
no,
to do something,
no,
you step right
I
in.
didn't, and now I'm a member of the trustees again, so.
You also filled the pulpit on lay Sunday and
I did,
brought a message.
2 or 3 times.
Yeah,
Something like
talked
that.
way too long.
What talk later? Hey.
I'm sitting in the back going,
Well, I didn't see anybody looking at their watch,
me.
because I mean, there are people, when you sit in a choir, there are people in
You
the
can-
congregation you watch that, some, the shades come down quickly and at a very predictable moment, and then others you can predict that they'll start looking at their watch if they're ready to go. And
I
then,
remember an elderly lady who shall remain nameless who couldn't hear, and she had a watch that you pushed a button and it spoke out what time it was. And when she did that, you knew it was time to Oh,
Gosh.
well, thank you, both of you, for all
Well, I
of
have
this.
something to say. You missed an interim pastor. Was his name Dale Brown?
Yes, Dale Brown was here for a summer
And I loved him.
because Steve Warren, I think, was finishing up education class or something. So instead of having somebody come July, he wasn't gonna come till September. And Dale Brown served as our pastor for that summer. That time. Tell me what you remember about him.
Well, I worked here then, and I remember, I don't even remember why I did it. In the offering, I got a wooden nickel. I don't know, somebody just threw it in there, whatever, when I was counting the money and had this wooden nickel. So I took that wooden nickel home and Frank made me a little board thing and I mounted it on it and I wrote on it, "Your sermon wasn't worth a plug nickel." And I gave it to him. And he loved it. I mean, it sat on his desk, and then later he told me he took it home, and because they came back and visited
Yes.
some after he
Yes.
left. Yeah, but I just really, really liked him.
I did too. He was an effective speaker and
Yeah.
met with people very well.
Yeah.
Was a good administrator for that period of time he was
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, I hated to see him.
Well, we talked about several things that you've been involved with, have you done? Do you have a special memory of your participation here at Hope? Your children are baptized here, your grandchildren are baptized here, your children were married here.
Yeah.
Scooter wasn't married here. He
It
was was married by Don, but he was married in Vale. They,
We'll count that.
I don't know
Yeah.
why they had to do that.
One of the lasting memories I have is during the Pope's visit
Yes.
and what we did, what we started out intending to do at the beginning of the day, and what it ended up being from the standpoint of what Hope did for some of those kids that were just.
Well, it started out being just kind of handing out water,
Yeah.
and it ended up being a triage center.
Well, yeah, they set up a triage, and we had
lost-
fire department, paramedics and stuff up there that had people on IVs because of the heat and the lack of water.
And many of those people walked from downtown to Cherry Creek Reservoir.
Yeah, we had, and we initially, when we planned this out, we said, well, with all that crowd, we don't want to open it up to, to have them, we'll hand out stuff and they can rest on the lawn and stuff, but we don't want them coming into the church and using the restroom. Well, we threw that idea out the window about in the early afternoon, and but there were 3 girls that, and they all wore these they had lanyards on and these cards that slipped in this plastic cover that had their names and where they were from and where they were staying locally. And because of the timing on it and stuff, these people were coming out and a lot of people were missing their transportation to wherever they were too. And these three girls came in, couldn't speak a lick of English. And so they finally understood that they had missed their transportation. And so we said, well, what do we do?
Where were they from?
And they were from Sweden.
Hmm.
And we finally, I looked at one of their lanyard deals and figured out they were staying at a parish in Boulder. And this was, I mean, we got here that morning about to set up and everything because the kids started walking in about 6:30 or 7 in the morning. And so we were all ready to go. So we got here, we were literally, I got home the next morning at 1 in the morning.
Well, we took the girls, we had to take the girls home with us,
You took them to Boulder.
and then took them to Boulder,
Yeah.
or he took them to Boulder, yeah.
Took 'em to
But we had to
Boulder.
figure out where they went,
Wow.
and whatever.
And I'll never forget, we let them out the door and this priest met us at the sidewalk and looked at the girls and said, "Where have you been?" I'm like, are you okay? We're glad to see you made it safely. Where have you been? I'm going, they've been with me. So, but one of them, in very, very, very broken English, said, "Thank you very much," and handed me a Swiss Army knife
Oh, really?
as a thank you.
Yeah. Well, you definitely went the extra mile, several of those.
Several
to
miles,
give
yeah.
them back.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and, but that was an amazing experience to see that mass of kids, and they were so filled with joy and the spirit and stuff, but they were struggling with the heat and just getting to where they needed to be, and it was a serious problem for a while.
Yes.
So we were glad we were doing what we were doing.
We talked about, yes?
I have a memory. So I was wedding coordinator of a wedding here, and it was not a member, it was a non-member. And they were from Dallas. Well, the mother lived in Dallas, and the kids lived here. And so the rehearsal was the day before at 5 o'clock. The wedding was the next day at 4 o'clock. So the wedding party came probably 1 or so and got dressed and whatever, and I'm putting on corsages and whatever. And the minister never shows up. And we used to have a minister, Reverend Huffnagel, that was retired. And if one of our ministers couldn't do it or didn't want to do it or whatever, he would come and do the weddings. So it's 3 o'clock and there's no Reverend Huffnagel. It's 3:30, it's 3:45. And the mother of the bride is coming yelling at me, "Where's this minister? We've got to start. I have a reception starting at such and such a time and we're going to be late." And I called everyone I knew that could come and perform this ceremony, and I couldn't get a soul. I mean, I called everybody. And so Linda Weber came, and she and I got the hymnal, and we're looking up the ceremony because I'm going to have to do it. And I am scared to death. And then the bride's brother comes. I mean, and it's 4 o'clock, and the bride's brother comes. "I'll do it." And I said, "Oh, are you sure?" He said, "I'll do it." Well, he did I said, "Well, here's the ceremony, He did a beautiful job, put in personal things that I couldn't have done,
Sure.
And it was a beautiful ceremony. So then they're married and they gather up their stuff and they leave, and here comes Reverend Huffnagel. I said, "You're late." He said, "I'm so sorry." Because, I had called him 1,000 times too. "I'm so sorry." He got the times because the rehearsal had been at 5. He just thought the wedding was at 5. I'll never forget that experience.
Well, you dodged a bullet not having
She
to
did.
do this ceremony.
I did. Oh, so then he said, he said, well, is there anything I can do? And I said, yep, there's one thing you can do. I know it's against the rules, but you got to sign this marriage certificate. And he said, gladly. I said, I know you weren't here. I know you didn't do it, but you got to sign it. And he did.
If there's a guidebook for wedding coordinators, you should put that story in.
I should. Oh my, I thought, oh, what
Oh,
am I gonna do, you know? I mean, I called Frank, I don't know where he was, I called Chris Wyant, I called, Clay Hill, I just called everybody I could think of that could do it, you know? I couldn't get anybody. So,
oh.
anyway, that's a memory that I have of the church,
But tell me what you like best about this church.
the people. We have many friends here, we travel with them,
But it's just, yeah, the people and what we do. You know, over the years, we've done a lot in terms of outreach and mission work and for years, John Clark and his, you know, the Thanksgiving and Christmas activity, and we were heavily involved in that for years. And but just that kind of outreach and doing things for other people. And
I used to work the soup kitchen downtown every
Yeah,
Monday.
Yeah.
Bruce
yeah,
Duncan and I, and
so it's just a family and what they do.
and what we miss is having the dinners.
Yes.
We don't ever do that anymore.
You mentioned the spaghetti and the burrito dinners. We used to have a great time and
Right,
you know, people.
yeah, we miss that.
Yeah.
The fellowship, I couldn't think of the word fellowship,
Nope.
yeah.
Well, would you mind sharing your thoughts about the current split within the Methodist Church?
It's unfortunate, because the mission and vision of the Greater United Methodist Church hasn't changed. But there's a basic difference of opinion with respect to gender identity, and I think that it's caused an unfortunate amount of turmoil that has hurt the church. Both the Global Methodist Church, which is the spinoff, I guess that's what they'll be called, and then what remains called the United Methodist Church. Both are suffering because it's not clear to the rest of the people in the country or the world why this division is happening and what our views are. You know, the United Methodist is inclusive. Our doors are open to, as this church's doors are open to all people. And the Global Methodist Church, they said, well, we're welcoming, but on our terms. I can't accept that. So that's why I'm still here. But I had an opportunity I was for 7 years, and you know this, I was involved in the United Methodist Foundation.
Yeah.
And during that time, I got invited to participate with Christy Kinnison, the director of the foundation, here to participate in a meeting. It was actually at the Southern Methodist the seminary at Southern Methodist University, to meet with the Council of Bishops for the church to discuss what the impact of a split would be on the foundation and other support agencies, like what about Westpath, what about UMCOR, all those things about what would you do, what would be done, have to be done differently. So we met for 2 days with the bishops in small group discussions and stuff, trying to lay out the ideas of what we needed to do. And the bishops were struggling with, because even within there were how many bishops? 12 or 15. There was division even there about the split. And because the African community, in many of the African countries, homosexuality is, in a secular sense, illegal. It's punishable by death.
Right.
And so they couldn't stand up and say, regardless of what they believed, they couldn't stand up and say, "Oh, well, we've got to fix our discipline. It has to be, you have to accept this." They were putting their lives at risk if they did so. So, and then some of the European, especially Eastern European churches, were in a similar boat or had similar views as the African churches had to have. And it was unfortunate because it's taken a lot of unnecessarily, to me, wasted a lot of energy.
Yes.
And it still hasn't happened. It's just kind of evolved over time, as opposed to finally a general conference getting together and say, that's us and this is you. And I'm glad to see that it's starting to roll out just by a matter of things happening, people getting fed up, and why is it taking so long until they're just making the move on their own?
Yeah.
And there are churches within our conference that have disaffiliated. And some of them not necessarily for the reason of the split to begin with. They're just tired of the noise. So, but it's an issue a bigger issue within society now. It's becoming more so. And that's unfortunate because I think it's, again, a waste of energy. That if we are in fact inclusive and we love one another, then, when Christ said, what is the greatest commandment? To love you, God, with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind, and to love your neighbor as yourself. There's a period at the end of that statement, not a comma and but or if. There's no condition on it. He said everybody. So you have to include everybody.
Well, both of you have been very active in this church for over 40 years. What would you like to see this church accomplish in the next 40 years?
A lot of what we used to do, get back to really some very hard missional work and outreach. We're doing that, but I think we could do more. I mean, I think Pastor Jeff and Pastor Hale they're working hard to grow the participation, and I think they're doing a lot in terms of the enthusiasm. I feel it's more enthusiasm in the church, and that's it's not as a result of anything that the prior pastoral staff has done. It's just what's happened over time, and then the pandemic just threw us all for a loop. And I think it's time to get back to what we used to do, because it was fun. It was work, but it was meaningful. It was really meaningful.
And I forgot to say that I love his reason for wearing jeans. I think that, I remember the first Sunday he was here, we were here, I said to Frank, he has on jeans. But of course we didn't know why, and then he told in our little small groups why. Well, Christmas, or I guess the Sunday before Christmas, I knew that Dosha's family would come to church on Christmas Eve. And they don't come now because there's always a ball game or something.
Sure.
And same with Scooter's family, they have hockey. Actually, hockey's worse than any of the sports, or being on Sunday because of getting ice time. But anyway, I told Pastor Jeff that our grandson would more than likely be coming, but that he wouldn't take his hat off. And it's not that he's disrespectful, but he has alopecia and he is having a hard time dealing with it, and he will not take his hat off. And he said, thank you for telling me, but that's why I wear jeans. You're welcome any way you want to come. And he did. He came. He wore his hat, didn't take it off. Dosha worried about it, and later she said, I think the man sitting behind us didn't appreciate Talon with his hat on. Well, it happened to be Jim Marcial. And I saw him at our clubhouse because he lives where we do. And I said that to him. I said, the boy that sat in front of you on Christmas Eve was my grandson, and he had his hat on, and I told him why. And I said, my daughter felt you didn't appreciate that. And he said, I didn't think anything about it, but thank you for mentioning
Good.
it to me. You know. It's hard. Like we go to ball games and he won't take his hat off for the national anthem. And I know people think that he's very rude, but he's now gotten to where he was wearing a hat and a hoodie over the hat. But now he's gotten to where he doesn't pull the hoodie up as often. He didn't want you to see this part back here, you know. But,
Well, and as you know, that's such a difficult time to start with. The teenagers trying to decide who they are and how they're going to
well,
work
and it
in the
was his
world.
freshman year in
Yeah.
high school.
Mhm.
Some kids made fun of him in one class, so he dropped that class and became just an aide to one of the counselors. And but he goes every day, and he went to basketball practice, but the team would like be practicing on this end, and he would just be shooting baskets because he could do that with his hat on.
Yeah.
And it was really sad. But hopefully he'll come to terms with it, or his hair will come back.
That's right.
But he's looking forward to baseball.
He'll have a great time for baseball season.
Yeah. So, but anyway, the pastor I just really like his thought of everybody's welcome. And even Frank's wore jeans a couple of times. Never ever in his life before. Frank didn't wear that anymore, but he doesn't wear jeans usually. But he has, especially when it was really, really cold. He's got some line jeans and he would wear them, you know, so.
Well, getting old, it get cold easier.
We talked about a lot of people and a lot of great memories and a lot of activities. I want to thank you for your faithful service to this church. Did we leave anything out? Any of the other things you want to talk about?
Well, you can't think of anything. You're welcome to cut me out of.
I think the church is, we've served the church in a variety of capacities, and because it's meaningful, and although it's not easy at times, but that's because the church has served us too. That's why we keep coming back.
Well said. Thank you very much for
Thank
sitting
you.
in this interview.
Thank you.
Thank you.